there's some interesting news coming out of the Supreme Court of Appeals in Bloemfontein for people who are currently using their homes to earn an income. Let's tell you about the judgment then. These people include those operating guest houses, providing student accommodation, as well as using their homes as office space. Now, in terms of the SCA ruling, municipalities now allow or are now allowed to impose a penalty rate on a property that contravenes its zoning provisions. Let's speak about this with property lawyer Neels Engelbrecht. A very good evening to you, sir. Welcome to the program. So what exactly are we talking about when we say zoning provisions, and how do we check them?
In every metro and every city council, all properties are zoned for specific use. So, for example, residential, business, guest houses, hotels, etc. So, if you use your property outside of the zoning or the category use that's allowed for that zoning, the city council definitely, well, in Johannesburg and also in Tshwane, and I think all the larger metros as well, may then levy a so-called penalty rate on that property. That would then increase the rates that's payable on that property, from example, from 800 rand to 3,500 rand per month. So it's quite a heavy burden that's put on the owner.
On what basis would one be penalized?
The basis for the so-called penalty is that you are using the property outside of the zoning for the property. Now, zoning, the purpose of zoning is to control what's going on, basically, to put it very simply, what's going on in your neighborhood, so that you don't have people running, for example, a business next to your house, any kind of business, a panel beating shop or whatever. So it's to control what's happening in every specific neighborhood.
And in your experience, Neels, pardon me, how familiar are homeowners, property owners, with zoning rules in this country?
Well, they're supposed to be quite knowledgeable, because you buy a property as a residential property normally in a neighborhood, and if you buy, for example, a guest house or a hotel or whatever other kind of business, you would know that property is zoned for that specific business. That's why you buy it. If you buy a guest house, you know the property should be zoned for a guest house. But unfortunately, many people are not all that au fait with the zoning requirements of the property, and it has become very important now with so many people working from home, because suddenly there are thousands of people that run businesses from home that is actually not zoned for that kind of business. It is also, you must understand also that every municipality has got its own bylaws, so it would, I'm not an expert on town planning, but you would, for example, I think in Johannesburg you're allowed to have 6 people working from home. That would be fine, but if you go out of that, you may be penalized.
So just on that point then, how common would it be for an area's zoning to change at all over the years, perhaps 1 or 2 decades? Does that happen?
It can happen. It is quite prevalent. For example, if you look at a very busy street like Beyers Nadia in Northcliffe, where we stay, many of the houses on Beyers Nadia applied for rezoning and was allowed to rezone as garages and businesses, etc. But normally, a residential area stays residential, and it's rarely allowed for a residential property to just change it to a business use. And it's a process that you've got to go through. You've got to go to a town planner. He's got to find out whether the city council will allow this change of zoning. If they do allow it, he will then apply at the city council for the rezoning. It's a long process. It takes up to 2 years to do that. But that's more of a town planning issue.
So in terms of enforcement then of this SCA ruling, is it effective immediately or retrospectively even?
Well, the SCA ruling just confirmed the current legislation that, under the Rates Act and the rates policy of the Johannesburg City Council. It's been in place for some time, several years, I think since 2010 or even before that. It was just not so widely known, and this judgment highlighted the fact that, because of all this work from home issue as well, so it highlighted the matter. We think the applicants, and I acted for Mr. and Mrs. Zibi, who rented out their properties, the property in Auckland Park, they only actually rented out 2 rooms in their property in Auckland Park, and they were then penalized because they run a hostel or student accommodation, and there's certain requirements for the City Council before they can actually penalize you. They must notify the owner, and then they must change the category use of the property in the Provincial Gazette from residential to the so-called unlawful use or penalty use. And in this instance, and often they simply don't do that, the municipalities. So they don't follow their own act and the rules. And we went to the High Court in Johannesburg on the basis that they didn't follow the act and their own policy. And the court found that the penalty that was levied to us actually unlawful and should then be written back. The City Council then appealed to the Supreme Court of Appeal, and the Supreme Court of Appeal upheld the appeal and found that the City Council is indeed allowed to raise a levy, and we think it's wrong. But under another act, the so-called Structures Act, and also the Supreme Court of Appeal found that it's inconvenient for a municipality to publish the change of the category use every time in the Provincial Gazette when they change the category use, which is, of course, simply not so. The City Council must follow the rule and must follow the act. On that basis, we're now appealing to the Constitutional Court because the minority in the appeals court found that this so-called penalty is in fact not a rate at all, but it is penalizing the conduct of the owner, of the consumer, and it does not fall under the Rates Act at all. Outside of the Rates Act, and our view is that simply cannot be. The Rates Act does not allow for penalties to be levied on the conduct of a consumer.
Neels Engelbrecht, good to speak to you, sir. Thank you very much for your time tonight.